She has so many different facets of her life that are important to the Georgia Women of Achievement.
I want people to know that she's a modest country girl from Walton County who comes from a plantation, not slavery, but people lived on the land. Went to the local public one-room schools and excelled, and with her siblings, and therefore were identified to come to Atlanta University.
Reading about her background, it's just a very unique family structure, I think. Her family supported her, even at a very young age 4, for her to start school. And particularly at that period of time, late 1880s, that was not the norm at all.
She did so well at AU that then she went to the University of Chicago in mathematics and was not even afforded the opportunity to sit in the classrooms, had to sit outside of the door. And then she came back to Atlanta without completing her master's because her sister died.
Bazoline Usher was Atlanta's first supervisor of Negro schools. She constantly fought to obtain adequate resources for the African American children under her watch.
But when you mentioned Atlanta public schools and teachers, particularly black teachers, the name of Miss Bazoline Usher always came up because it seemed like you had to go past her to get into the system.
She started as a teacher, and she worked as a teacher for a number of years and became assistant principal, and then was promoted to principal, and then she actually became an administrator at the City Hall.
Well, some of the school teachers told me stories of being informed that Bazoline Usher was coming to the school, or she was in the school, and that they would pass the eraser from class to class, and that was the secret, that she was coming, because she would walk in and sit down to observe, not to reprimand, but to then give instruction to a teacher on how she might be better.
As I grew up, and later, after I finished school, the name of Bazoline Usher was right there. And she was very instrumental. I'm sure some much older than me, teachers, they, refer with deep respect and appreciation because of what she did in the field.
Her mother named her Basil after the herb because her mother, cooked with it and just really loved that herb. So when she was born, she was named Basil, and she thought the name was too masculine, so she changed her name to Bazoline, and because she liked that name better. But again, she was her own person from a very early age.
She had a way about her, disciplined, sophisticated, but at the same time, warm, caring. I always felt that others felt when Bazoline came in the room, they were to stand up. They had that kind of demanding presence, and then just the education behind them.
She was responsible for my getting into Atlanta Public Schools. So after I came back from my study at Columbia, I wanted to teach in Atlanta Public Schools. And so I guess you kind of had to go past Miss Usher to get in.
Around 54, someone identified black women in Georgia to start Girl Scout troops. So Babine was identified, but Babine had Atlanta, so she put together the first black Girl Scout troops and the first black troop leaders.
I just think she had a lifelong love of learning and of teaching, and I think the Girl Scout work was just a part of that.
She never said this to me, but she saw herself as a part of the civil rights movement in that her contribution was lifting the race through education and instruction. So she was never a part of the activities that some others were doing, like the Kings, but she thought she was making a contribution.
But one of the interviews that she did with Atlanta Historical Society, she talked about how at that period of time, to be a teacher, you couldn't be married. That was not the culture, that was not approved. And so she made that personal sacrifice as well with her own life, because she was so dedicated to her faith through her teaching ministry and through her commitment to all of her students.
She had 2 sisters and a brother. Of course, one of the sisters was my grandmother, Inez Usher. But they were very close. And they were all athletes. Babine played tennis and Sam played baseball. And I think my grandmother was a swimmer, so they were all involved in athletics as well. By the time she was 30, she was the Georgia Women's Negro champ. So that means that she was out and about competing.
She was highly respected in this community. And whenever you talked about Atlanta Public Schools, the name Bazoline Usher came up. And so she was highly respected and regarded in the education field.
From the very beginning, the Georgia Women of Achievement's mission has been to recognize and to honor women just like her, who have shown just incredible personal strength.
Now, you know, when you keep living, people pass away. So she lived to be 106.
Wow, that's
Therefore,
wonderful.
she didn't have any contemporary. She lived so long. Many of the stories at the funeral were stories from my friends. If she retired at 60 and lived to be 106, she lived 46 years after she retired.
That's really something.